Welcome to Elite Rugby SandC podcast, the best podcast talking all things rugby and strength and conditioning. At Elite Rugby SandC, we provide athletes with strength and conditioning programs that provides you with everything you need to become a beast and take your game to the next level. No matter what stage of the year or season, Elite Rugby SandC has a program for you. You can try before you buy, so try our 7-day $7 trial to get a taste of what we offer here at Elite Rugby SandC. So take your game to the next level, become a beast, and join Elite Rugby SandC today. G'day, Ben. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you, Kieran. Went out for a walk jog this morning and at an old man's pace. So beautiful day, enjoyed it. How about yourself?
Yeah, going really well, thanks. Did some recovery today with the boys after a big game yesterday. Went down to the pool, did a active recovery, which was really nice, and also been getting some sunlight as well before it, gets a bit cloudy and too dark down here in Canberra. The sun does like to hide away during the colder times of the year, so it's nice to have the sun out now.
Yeah. The best thing about it being a bit cold in Canberra, training sessions are a lot faster, so people get fitter. We might talk about that a little later.
100%. So before we get started today, I just wanted to ask, two questions that have sort of popped up into my mind sort of the last 2 weeks. One is just, sort of talking about effort, and the other one's talking about cramps. So the first one, what comes to your mind when I say you can't coach effort in your athletes?
Oh, you definitely can. You 100% can. That's your job as a coach or a strength and conditioning coach, to coach effort. To be coach effort, they have to be aware of their effort and know what is considered effort and what isn't. Some people will have it in spades. Some people have always been picked because they've been a gun player or they've been the biggest unit and they've always been rolled out. So as they move up the pyramid, their performance has to improve because everyone's, got the skills or the size or power compared to, say, age group work. I know a lot of people, even at the old club that I work with in the professional world, some guys that are playing for the Wallabies now that weren't getting selected early on in their careers because they didn't have effort and repeat efforts, and they weren't aware of it because they were always picked as juniors. So, no, you can definitely coach effort. You've got to have a willing participant that wants to, but you've also got to repeat the message, and all the coaching staff have to repeat it in the same way. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this was something that I heard another coach say, and this coach is a quite younger coach, and just hearing of it, I was like, no, you can. That's coming back to you as the coach and the coaching team and the organization when you're having your training sessions is to set the standards. And this is the type of play that we want to do when we really value, repeat efforts, getting off the ground, those 1%ers that, you see on the what sometimes tape doesn't show, you chasing down a try that is a certain try, but you're still running down to maybe block off their, turn into the goals. And so it's a harder kick, all those little 1%ers, you can teach that. And it comes back to your training sessions and comes back to the off season and preseason. You're working on these little things and making sure that your players are aware of it, because sometimes players just might not know that it's important to, do this or do that. So yeah, it was really eye-opening when this coach did say you can't coach effort. And I was like, no, yeah, you certainly can. It comes back to you at the end of the day to set that standard and making sure that the playing group is working hard. And if they do want to be successful on the field, then they're going to have to work a lot harder than they think they can.
Yeah, it takes me back to a club I was at, and there was an award after a game called, I won't say it, the stuff people don't see. And it's all about the hard effort off the ball, clean outs, getting off the ground quickly, all this effort off the ball that people don't see. And that was the award that was recognised the most and got the most cheer. If you won that award, you got your picture up on a picture frame that would sit in the team room for that game, and they'd be just start filling up over the year. And that's the person with the most amount of effort off the ball, doing all the hard work that the normal stats don't see or the TV don't see. That was the biggest award, and that got the best cheer each week. So you can definitely, it's what you value as a club.
Yeah, that award, it just reminds me of for the AFL team that I'm with now, or Aussie football team that now, after each game, they will go around alphabetical order or from first to last or last to first and go around and say what was the one moment they thought was really good by that one player and was sort of a game changing play and, effort. And it's just everything that you talked about, and I was really aware of it yesterday, going around the group and they're just saying, Jimmy did this and it turned the game around for that one moment, or it was in the fourth quarter when, Timmy did that. And it was really cool because, you're showing all these little positive things, sharing it as a group, and then everyone's pretty much getting recognized for those little efforts. And then they all vote at the end, like you just keep tally of who's the most common coming out of people mouths when they're talking about these little efforts, and they take a tally and they get a winner, and it's celebrated, and it's just a really good way to sort of end the day. Even if you do lose, it's like you're going around and focusing on a really nice positive and recognizing areas that can often get forgotten, and these players are really aware and making sure that it does get recognized, because you could do something and you talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, I don't really remember you doing that. But yeah, I think it's really cool, and it's the first time that I've seen it in a team. And I would highly recommend other coaches and sporting teams do that at the end of the day. Go through as a team and just highlight one effort that you thought was really awesome from your teammates, and take a tally, take a vote, and the person whoever gets the most wins after that game.
I like it so much. I'm writing notes on it. Like I've never seen it done in that way. I think that is, yeah, that's some brilliant coaching, and then you're educating people on what to focus on, what people appreciate, and then a lot of that time it's going to be they came over and I'm thinking in Aussie rules, they created space so that I could do this work. They ran so hard to actually create space, but so and so took the mark, but that lead took all the defenders away, so that we got that opportunity, and that will teach you the effort areas. So yeah, really
Yeah,
good.
yeah, it's awesome. I'm not too sure what the votes and if you win it goes towards to at the end of the year. I think it's just an award at the end of the year, but yeah, it's a great way to share recognition amongst the group, and yeah, I would highly recommend it for everyone.
Yeah, I like it.
So the second question, before we get back into the GPS metrics and training loads, is on game day, what is the best way to avoid cramps, and what should athletes do, before the game and during and maybe after to, avoid cramps coming on?
Yeah, so this is a great question because cramps come from several areas. It could be a hot day, so and excess sweating, so they're losing electrolytes. So that one you look for, they usually got cramps in multiple areas. What you do there is you make sure that they've got some, give them hydrolyte an hour before the game and maybe during the game as well. Then you've got people that actually get quite nervous and drink excess of amount of waters on before games because it's something nervous that they can do, or I'll make sure I'm hydrating, and they probably go a little bit overboard with it, and then they lose their salt levels or their electrolyte levels, and they lead to cramps later on as well. So that's the overhydration, and the first one, losing excess electrolytes from sweating. Then there's mechanical cramping. So if your first ever wet or muddy game, you might have experienced this when you see people with their slipping around a lot more than usual. The gastros and the soleus are doing a lot more balance and stability work. So it's adding to the workload, and you get cramps from that. The other one is a lack of conditioning. It really is. You've got a lack of conditioning to the event. And the cramps usually happen at the beginning of the season when people, you can train really hard, but once you're in a super competitive environment, the speed, the change of direction, everything's up a little bit more. So the calf complex is working that little bit harder. How do you avoid that? You have to experiment through your training. So electrolytes, magnesium products might work. In an acute event, that's where something like a pickle juice to give that almost as basically forcing the body to relax and allow that muscle to stop working, sort of release a little bit. With the pickle juice, you just swash it around your mouth for anywhere from a minute to 90 seconds. You don't have to swallow it. And there's almost a reflex response where you get some dilation. So that opens up the calf. And the other one is some people are just predisposed to it as well. So we used to call it your crampers. So you'd have people just would get cramps, but you'd have protocols for them like 2 days leading up. You increase the amount of electrolytes, you send some home with them. You give them a lot more on game day. You make sure that there's pickle juice available for them for halftime even. And that's the type of stuff to avoid cramps. The other one is just looking after your calves a little bit and giving them a massage and roll out and getting them to relax as well and just giving them that bit of attention. So, yeah, several different things there, but you've got to take a bit of an approach for each person. But generally in, say, clubland, it's going to be a lack of conditioning. Say in rugby, it would be your tight five, they push in scrums. There's a whole lot of isometric load on their calves. Then they go run around because they haven't trained that hard. Like there's load on their calves in the scrums, rucks, mauls, and then they're running and they cramp up a little bit. What ideas have you had for some of your guys?
Yeah, I think you touched upon all the most important ones, and just having a Powerade before the game, but adding some extra table salt into it. Something as simple as that, or even if you're just having cordial and a bit of pink salt, put some in there. Like it's a easy but effective way, especially if you don't want to go out and buy, say, Hydrolite. It might be a little bit expensive and out of your budget. You can do that and it's very effective. But just taking ownership of your hydration. It comes back to you at the end of the day. You really got to make sure that you're hydrated and you're sipping on water throughout the day, but you're also the day before you're making sure that your hydration is really good, and then even after the game as well. You're not just going straight into the tins and forgetting your hydration levels, because you don't want to be cramping up on the way home in the car. That's just bad luck right there. Or you're sitting on the couch later that night, you're like, oh shit, got a cramp coming on. So you really got to pay attention to your body and know how much you need, because like you said, you don't want to overdo it where you feel just really bloated because you've drinking too much water and you've gotten rid of some electrolytes, and you don't want to underdo it and then you only played half a game and you're getting some really bad cramps. Another area I'd probably mention is hydration doesn't stop when it gets cold as well. You really got to pay attention. And one thing, when it is cold weather, we sort of forget about our hydration. You're like, no, I'm fine. And you might get halfway through a game again and start cramping. You're like, but it's cold. It's not hot. I was only getting cramps when it was really warm games, So making sure that you are paying attention throughout the whole preseason, whole in season, and well into the off season as well. So, but at the end of the day, it comes back to you. So do make sure that you're paying attention to it and setting a good standard for yourself, but also for the team as well.
Yeah. And if you do cramp a bit, play with it at training. That's where you do all your playing. You don't play with it on game day. You play with all of those interventions and preparation at your training.
100%. So moving on. So we did part one of GPS metrics and training loads with Ben a week ago now. So make sure you go listen to that, because we're just building upon that episode. So we're going to talk more about why GPS metrics and units are important, but we're going to be talking now in the in-season. So our scenario was you're a new strength and conditioning coach at a rugby union club. You had a really good 12-week preseason. Now you're moving into the in-season. And let's say you're going to have around, 15 to 17 rounds plus finals. You're training Tuesday, Thursday, but now you are playing on Saturday. Whereas previously you had a individual led session on a Saturday, and you've gotten all that data that you collected in the preseason. Now you're going to be collecting some new data in the in-season. So the first question is, you've done all that hard work now in the preseason, and now you head into the in-season ready to see how your team goes. What are you trying to focus on during the in-season with training load?
Yeah, so what you're trying to do is maintain the level of conditioning and performance through the week that will allow you to have a good game, but also then you're trying to minimize the fatigue that they take into a game. So it's this really good balance of making sure that you're getting certain metrics to protect them from injury and make sure that they're prepared for the hardest part of the game, and then trying to work out their fatigue so that they can go for the length of the game and start games well. So that's your goal really, and it's a balancing act, which is actually quite fun, and every team's slightly different based on the way that they play, the age of their players, and their weather conditions. So that always plays a bit of a role as well.
And just a sort of a reminder for athletes and coaches, what session should be the hardest? Should it be the Tuesday or the Thursday? And what's the difference as well between that Tuesday and Thursday? Just to remind our coaches and fellow athletes out there.
Yeah, so the hardest is a different way. So hardest in terms of volume, Tuesday. Hardest in terms of intensity, Thursday. Okay, so hardest isn't probably the best way. You'd get more volume of work done on your Tuesday, and you'd intensify but lower the volume on your Thursday. So they're hard in different ways for different reasons.
Awesome. So what should a normal training, week and block look like for the in-season in an ideal world? And what should each session sort of structure look like as well on the Tuesday and Thursday?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a loaded question. There's never anything perfect, but a way that I've looked at it is when I first started getting GPS, and for about 4 years after that, just at a club level, I found that as soon as we went over about 17.5 Ks per week, including game, we'd struggle. So you can start working out, that's on average, some people are playing more or less. So let's say an average of a game is 6 to Ks. Could be less for some people, could be more. So how much of that is remaining now? Probably around 11. Yeah. Okay. So I found in clubland, it tends to be because people are working and so forth from different things, and training sessions seem are longer than, say, in the professional world. Okay. Because you've got to get that done. You can't have unit sessions AM, PM, or on different days. So I found anywhere between 5 to 5.5 Ks of total volume on your Tuesday was pretty good. And you were looking at trying to get your meters per minute. I used to try and get it around about 80 meters per minute. So you can see you could burn out that time pretty quickly. So it's not a length of time that you're looking at, it's how much you've got to spend there. And on your Thursday, I'd find that 4 to 4.5 is pretty good, but you intensify your basically your training sessions in terms of meter per minute and accelerations and high speed metrics and so forth a little bit more. So I found between 70 to 90, if you could do that, was in terms of meters per minute, was pretty good. And that's, say, decent club level football in a cool climate.
Awesome. And what is sort of accelerations looking like on that Tuesday and Thursday? Are we trying to sort of split it evenly between the two, or we're trying to have more on one day than the other?
Okay, so probably what I might do is talk about, before we get there, probably about games. So with GPS, first, what you've got to do is how you collect your data. If you're just looking at, say, your total distance covered, what you do is start at the beginning of the game, finish the first half, same for second half. Okay, so you're just looking there. The next stage after that is to go and break that up into ball in play. Okay, so you've got that total distance, you go ball in play. What's the intensity like when the ball's in play? All of a sudden, that intensity jumps right up. And then within that ball in play, over a period of time, you start looking at the longest length or longer lengths of your, say, periods of play. So you might look at 4 minutes, what's the meters per minute and the accelerations like for different positions in that time. Then you go down to 3, 2, 1, and then you start going even down to 30 seconds. Sometimes the ball might be in play for. Then you start looking at the metrics involved with that. What I did was, rather than just the game, start looking at what they were like in those areas when you won versus losing. And a lot of the time when teams when we were winning, our intensity was up in those periods of play, and that gives you an idea of the total load that they experience, then the load of when ball's in play. So what I used to think of is your ball in play is when your skills and your 15 on 15 and stuff should be done. Then when you start looking for those shorter intense periods of time, even within those, say 2-3 minutes, you start looking at when you've won, what's the intensity like, and then you start looking for the upper echelon, the top 25 in terms of intensity of those areas, and that's how you base your conditioning. Yeah. So that's what I'd look at, and how you'd split that. You'd depend on between your Tuesday and Thursday. So on your Tuesday, you're going to start bias more. Basically, more your stuff that needs to be resolved as a team. So your basic skills, your scrums, your line out, your backline work, and then you might go into new plays and so forth. So that's going to be a longer, slower session, but you've still got to make sure that the conditioning that you do within that is at the extreme of the game, and it could only be 3 minutes at a time too, and it's 3-4 efforts of that. If you can get that with your skills and conditioning games, fantastic. If you can't, you're going to have to top them up. Then you'd start on, say, your Thursday. They're going to be doing a lot more 15 on 15, that type of work, and open it up. So you'd actually, the work that I'd sort of do at the beginning of the training, knowing that they're probably not going to get the acceleration. So that I'd work a lot more on my speed and acceleration component at the front end of warm-ups and just before going in, and then a little bit of higher velocity stuff to prepare them for their 15 on 15.
Awesome. So when you are structuring and planning for the week, you're going to have a different head coach and in everyone's different situations, and some might give you a certain period of time during a specific area where they want it, or they might come to you and ask, okay, when do you want your training block to top up, or continually to improve the group? When do you want it in that training session? What would you say is the better way to structure that? Would you have it sort of straight after the warm-up? Would you say maybe do a couple of skills block, then they come see you, or they do it towards the back end of the session? And how does that differ between Tuesday and Thursday?
Okay. Oh, first of all, there's a difference between coaches. So some coaches are very 15 on 15 focused. So you get a lot of that higher speed meters for your backs and that type of stuff, and longer sessions and higher volume there. So you'd need to focus more on the speed, because that's what they're missing out on, that coaching bias. Then you might get a coach that's very skill orientated, very close skill, solve this problem, and they're not doing as much 15 on 15. So your conditioning would have to be more that MAS approach, a longer work to make up for that stuff that's missing out. So you've got to work out what your coach's bias in training is. And then you'd have conversations on, okay, in this training, are we introducing anything new in this training session? Oh, yes, we are. Okay, well, don't do your conditioning before you're introducing something new, because you pre-fatigue them, and then cognitively they won't be learning. Okay. If they're not, and they're just going over stuff that they've done all the time, that's when you could actually do it at the beginning of the session and pre-fatigue them to know that they can execute those skills and those activities and that plan that they've done all the time, but under fatigue. So if they're all new content, I do it at the end so that they've got all their new content, because it's going to be stop-start. You don't want to cognitive fatigue them. But if it's all old content that they should know well, then I do it at the front end of your training sessions. And that could be Tuesday versus Thursday as well. That depends.
Awesome. And if you are just using, MAS conditioning to as your method of way that you're going to continually improve the training group, what's sort of the bare minimum you need, rep sets and time, and what would be the maximum of time that you want with the playing group as well, because you don't want to overdo it and we don't want to undo it. What would be sort of the ideal range for coaches out there?
Well, look at what your coach does and whether you've got those markers. I looked at about 80 meters per minute and about 5 to 5.5 Ks in a game in a training session on Tuesday. If you're getting close to that, you need less. All right. If you're not getting close to that, you'd need more. So depending, you can get in a very consistent cycle. Sometimes I've used as little as 2 times 3 minutes, 2 times 4. Sometimes I've had to go to 3 or 4-minute sessions within that. And not just straight line. A lot of the time I'll use shuttle or off-deck shuttle. So you put the calculations in there. So we've got that in that MAS product that we're selling, where you can go straight line or you could go a shuttle or bounce. And depending on your positions as well, you might want your outside backs to go more straight line. You might want your flankers to go a lot more shuttle, and then your tight forwards might be getting a lot more bounce work. If you've got a skills-orientated coach that doesn't do a lot of 15-on-15 work, where they're not going to get that. Also, looking at your training sessions, in a game, on average, in Super Rugby, a player will need to get off the ground 42 times. So if they're only getting off the ground 5 or 6 times in a training session, or 10 to 20, you'll have to do a lot more bounce work, because that's a conditioning thing, getting them off the ground and moving quickly. So you'd look there. Does that answer your question there?
It does, in a bit more in depth, and you'd probably say, it's definitely challenging, in the situation that you have, if you got a head coach who gives you sort of the bare minimum, or you do have a head coach that gives you a bit more freedom, and in both those situations, you could be looking at probably a 4 to 6 minute block if you're only going to get them maybe once or twice on a Tuesday, and then maybe on a Thursday you just have one block and you may be looking around the same time as well. But just make sure that you are maximizing the time that you do have with them, and figuring out, does it just need to be straight line? Does it need to be a shuttle? Does it need to be off deck work? Or does it need to be, a couple of multiple changes of direction in different distances as well? And just however long you get them for, make sure, yep, I wanted it this time for this duration, and making sure that the head coach isn't taking away from your drills, because you got to remember, you are important to the team as well. And it's quite easy for when you are winning or losing, that sort of the strength conditioning blocks and those, especially conditioning, gets sort of put to the side, and time gets taken out. So you really got to make sure that you prioritize that. And you could be structuring the training program, and your conditioning is always at the straight after the warm up, and own that, and just make sure that the coach isn't taking any time away from you, and you tell them the importance of continuing to improve and how it's helping the playing group as well. That was probably another area that I wanted to touch upon as well.
Yeah, and there's a bit of research saying that around the 10 to 11 minutes of conditioning is quite good when you're using MAS type work.
Yeah, Dan Baker, I think it was, of accumulated time, you could split that over the Tuesday and Thursday, and you could even, it was something ridiculous, like you could even just get like 6 to 8 minutes and you'd still see improvement, or you'll be able to continue to have that level of fitness that you've achieved in the preseason as well. So if you are struck for time, you can just tell the coach, hey, okay, this is what I need then. If you're going to cut my block out, I only need 5 minutes. And if you tell them it's 5 minutes, like surely they should just be able to give you 5 minutes. It's not that much time at all. So, and if it is 5, make it the best 5 minutes that you can.
Yeah, and that's why I spoke about before. When you look at your GPS within games, go ball and play, and then have different areas of time. So you might have 4, 4, 3 minutes. Then what you do is you look for the amount of meters per minute, the number of accelerations, high speed exposure within that hardest, so the top 25 echelon work when you've been successful, and that's your conditioning.
100%.
Then you're preparing them for that. And I'd like to do it is we can do it once, have a small rest, and do it again. So that way, if you have to defend for that period of time, you get the ball back, you can take full advantage of it. Or you defend for that period of time, we're going to have to do it again. It doesn't break you.
Yeah, 100%. So, what are some non-negotiables when it does come to in-season training loads?
Some non-negotiables is you look at are you preparing them for the game, and that is, are you in each position? Are you getting the accelerations that you need in your training to prepare for games? It doesn't have to be all of them. Are you doing some acceleration for your type 5 guys? They've got to be moving quick and accelerating. Well, for your guys playing further out, are they getting not only the acceleration, but the exposure to max velocity that they need, and a bit of high speed running as maintenance for their able to perform their task, but also as a protective thing, like an inoculation on their hamstrings as well. So that's what you look for, the things where that would break people down if they're not exposed to it, or would leave you vulnerable if people can't do that in a game. And looking at, as you get closer to the game, less volume, but you can maintain some intensity. Early in the week, you can do your more volume, but less intensity. That would be my non-negotiables. And everything else is up in the air and debatable, and what you can change. But that's would be my conversations that I have with coaches.
And if I'm adding on to that, it's, our non-negotiables, it's a lot of things that we should have done throughout the preseason, and our non-negotiables are, we get to training early and we start doing our movement prep. We start doing our banded work, and that all, comes back to that training load as well, because we got to be able to best prepare our players to handle the training load and to maximize that as well. So for my current Aussie rules boys, it's making sure that, you get into training, you're doing some banded work before you go out there and touch the footies and start kicking around, because I want to avoid those little injuries that may come when you pick up a footy and just kick it and then you've torn your quad, like all those little things, and making sure that, our training load in our warm-up is staying fairly consistent. If I'm going to add a new movement in, I've understood, okay, that's going to do this to the body or do that. And is there something that I'm already doing that's very similar nature that I need to cancel out because of this new way that I'm delivering it as well? So I really need to make sure that training load in the warm-up is consistent, and I have that steady flow-on effect as well, and I'm not just scratching it straight away for something completely new, which is a different stimulus and training load for our playing group. It's making sure that you're hitting, certain distances in your sprints, in your VMAX stuff on your Tuesday. We're continuing to hit that. We're going to be doing it different speeds over different blocks, different distances and stuff like that, and vary the speeds. And then maybe on a Thursday, we're doing our sort of, flying 10s or flying 15s. And it's a fairly consistent load, but you're slowly, manipulating it so that the playing group isn't getting too comfortable and they're still striving forward. So when I think of those non-negotiables, it's sort of that training structure, making sure that we've got our movement prep, our warm-up is consistent, we're getting our high speed exposures, and making sure that, it's similar duration when we do our conditioning blocks and it's nothing new. Or if I am introducing something new, I'm letting the playing group know the reasons why, and I'm going to take it probably a lower intensity and slowly build it up. I can't just add this new thing in, halfway through the season, and it gives us a massive spike in load. And I might not see anything in terms of injury that session, but maybe the next session or maybe game day, something suffers there. So that's what sort of comes to my mind with the non-negotiables.
Yeah, it's quite funny. You can tell I'm used to the professional world where, yep, of course you're going to do movement prep. Of course, the warm-up's going to be your manipulation of load is your job. So, yeah, it's a non-negotiable is that that.
Hi, everyone. We just want to take a quick break from this episode. We hope you're enjoying this episode so far and all the content we have produced. We appreciate all the support from our listeners and followers so far. If you haven't already, sign up to Elite Rugby SandC blog today. We provide free exclusive content every single week to our subscribers. You'll find our website link in our bio below. Remember to like, subscribe, and share Elite Rugby SandC on all social media platforms to all your family and friends. Thanks again for all your support, and now back to the episode. So, are there any methods you use to communicate training loads to players and coaches that makes it a bit easier to understand what's going on from the GPS metrics and data?
Yeah, so there's all different methods, and it's a debate with the club guys. I didn't worry too much. It was more for us coaching. The guys had other things to worry about. They work, they study. Their football was a little bit of their outlet. The guys that were more elite and aspirational, yep, you'd have those conversations with. But you'd take that pressure off those guys not to worry about it, because they start worrying about all the wrong things. Or I didn't. I'm 5 meters off what I normally get from a high speed. Mate, we've got a tolerance there. It's okay. It's not be all or end all. And at the elite level, you start going down to breaking down every drill. We'll have, just say you've got a 3-minute catch pass drill that's in that training session. That will be part of what's delivered. You'll have basically a page that will stick up somewhere. We'll go what that training session what looked like, what that looked like for each individual, what that looked like for each position, and then what each position and person did within that drill. So you get down to that level, because we're trying to manipulate and change intensity and show who's working hard, who's not. And if it's a good, well-designed drill, but we're not getting the outcome because of effort and focus, we'll address that. If it's a poor design drill that's not getting what we want, then us as a coaching group have to manipulate those variables to get an outcome. So, and that's the sort of two extremes of that area. How about yourself?
Yeah, so it's interesting coming over to Aussie rules and how interested they are in terms of what they're producing on their training metrics, because they know if they do these little things, it's going to equal to that. And the more successful teams, run harder and play harder as well. So there's a lot of correlations, and they love taking their stats as most sports do, but they're very embedded in those analytics, and it's been awesome. So one thing that I've played around with, is just using Google Docs and just putting it up there and allowing the players to see it. Obviously, you restrict their access so they don't change any data. So make sure that you do that. Make sure you don't, open up the page for everyone to, chop and change, because that could be chaos. But it's just giving them, just using Google Docs and making sure that you know how to, use the formulas and everything in there. And what I've done recently is just I split it into Tuesday, Thursday, and our game day, and having targets that sort of players should just roughly hit, because I am still learning the playing positions and how different they are. So it's just, red, you haven't hit it; yellow, you're pretty close; and then green, you've hit your target, and that's awesome. And it's bringing some awareness that this is areas that we are very important. So we're looking at our training volume, we're looking at the jog, walk, run, we're looking at our sprint distance and sprint efforts, and our hard running efforts, and our top speed. And it's giving that back to the players. And the ones who haven't hit their sprint efforts, so 6 meters per second and above, that they have been aware of that. And then say on a Thursday, we're going to address that and get them up, and not overdo it, but to say, hey, I really need you to work hard when you've say there's certain drills that we do. We kick the footy and then you run to where you've kicked it. So when you've kicked that footy, I need you to run really hard, and I need to do that maybe 5 or 6 times just to make up for Tuesday when you only got, say, 3 exposures, when I needed you to hit around 11 to 12 exposures as well. So I think it's going well so far, and it's just providing feedback. Oh shit, I only did what, 4.5 when the target was 6 kilometers plus. Why is that? Oh, I was getting some treatment and I missed the first 15 minutes of the warm-up. All right, sweet. You're going to stay back and do a couple of lower intensity conditioning blocks, nothing too hard, because I know you're pretty fatigued from that session, but we need to get your training volume up, because we don't want that flow on effect for the next couple of weeks. So it's been a good tool. You can easily change it to what you think is appropriate. What I've done on the Tuesday, it's 55% of weekly training load. I set those targets, and it's 45% on the Thursday. It's just a rough guide of what I think is appropriate. And when I've talked to Ben and also a couple other colleagues as well who've done stuff with AFL, they're like, yep, that's a pretty good guide to have. And I'll sort of change it as the sort of season goes on to see if it's appropriate or not. But so far it's working, and it's really good feedback to get the players to see their stats and see if they're in the green, red, or the yellow if they've just missed it as well. So something as easy as that can be a way to share the data and share what's going on with the players.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it on the head there. So you've collected the data, then the data is you've processed it in a way so that you can get some discernible information of the individual efforts from people. Then you've made it, you've educated the players on that, and then you've put interventions in place to have an effect on that data that's important if they've missed out. And that's totally why it exists, so you don't get these peaks and troughs in training load, or what we used to call is injuries from load management mistakes. So that's fantastic. And look, you'll play with that and you'll get it more to your needs, but you've basically got a system that you're playing with now, and you'll start seeing trends and what's going on. But you can intervene early, and a lot of the time players will know, oh, I've got to train a little bit harder because I'm missing out on this area. And then it becomes habit forming for them to do it within their football session. And the amount of top ups and the amount of interventions that you have to do as a coach will disappear, because they start getting it through their football, which is where you really want them to display it.
100%. So if the playing group is starting to feel fatigued from games and the training load, do you change the training load sort of straight away, or do you leave it for a couple of, training sessions to see what happens in season? Because it's a bit different to preseason when we ask this question, but yeah, what happens in season when they are starting to feel fatigued?
I'd keep it very, very steady at first, because if you manipulate it up and down too quickly, then you won't know whether they've adapted. So going from particular the front end of a train, so going from pre-season to your first few games, they are more fatigued, and a lot of it is more cognitive, and they're running harder and doing harder stuff, because no matter what you do, you can't mimic competitive exposure in your training sessions versus competition. So that's why competitions exist. They get new higher standards. So what I would suggest you do is talk to those individuals about, okay, for the first 3 to 4 days after your game, you have to prioritize your nutrition, your hydration, more sleep, and doing some recovery modalities to get you up. So I used to do this wellness questionnaire with people, and it'd be a questionnaire would pump out how they are as a percentage. And the second part of the questionnaire would be talk about their sleep, whether they were good on their sleep, their hydration and nutrition and recovery. And that would be how professional are they as a percentage. Right. You find that to get you, and the rough stuff here, to say they were feeling 60% of where their normal 100, and they'd only been 80% as professional as they could have, there's still room for 20% where you can adjust it. You'll never get them back to 100. You can't, right? That's not part of it. But their professionalism is outside of football is what gets them back. So that's the education process with them, and keeping that workload fairly steady so that their bodies can adjust, and they can predict it, and they know what's going on. Then they actually start adapting to that. And when they've adapted to it, that's when you can manipulate it. But I wouldn't manipulate it until, unless it's absolutely dire, like you might have a wet game on a muddy field and everyone's wellness is right down, and you go, well, there's a lot more mechanical stress. I know what caused that. Yes, I do have to adjust it. If the weather conditions are steady, the pitch conditions are fairly steady, I'd look for other modalities as a way to bring them back. Does that make sense?
I think the really important part there is the educational piece of making sure that your players know how to recover properly. And some players just might not know, because you can't assume that they do know. As a coach, we know that they should know and should be better at those areas, but you really got to make sure that before the season happens, that the players know what are the most important pillars to recovery and what are some other things that they can aid to their recovery, and making sure that they are consistently getting those recovery modalities in, and starting those habits quite early in the preseason, so when it comes to in season and it's getting a bit tougher to maybe say get out of bed and go down to the pool and do a recovery session, that the habits there, and they know that how important it is, and not trying to establish new habits in the in season when they're tired, it starts to get a bit colder depending where you're playing your rugby, and all these other excuses start popping up. So yeah, you definitely got to be professional around your training and your recovery, and if you're not maximizing your time outside of playing and training with your recovery, then yeah, it comes back to you really, and that's probably the reason why you're feeling fatigued. It might not be the training load, it might be your professionalism after games and training.
Yeah, I'd go move from knowing and caring are two different things. They have to care about it, not just know about it.
100%. So how do you best prepare your players to peak at the back end of the season and for finals in regards to their training load? How do we get them to feel good towards the end and get them ready for the most important part of the season?
Well, that's you as a coaching group. Basically, you've got them into this steady area where they're used to their basically their training load through that season. Then you might start to back it off by just little percentages of volume only. So you keep the intensity, but you're saying, well, what volume do I need to knock it down? Like maybe a few weeks out from finals, you might go, oh, we might knock it down by 10% on Tuesday and Thursday. You might only do that 2 or 3 times. So they're still doing 70% of their volume in their last week of finals in a grand final. So that's how I would do it. And it could even be a little bit more if you've got travel or injuries and so forth. But yeah, it's just small manipulations in volume down, and that's all you have to do, really.
But would you allow players as well to say, hey, we're going to be, taking a bit of training load off, but you still have, say, some free time at the end of training for, say, 10, 15 minutes to work on some areas that you want to work on. If you feel like you want a little bit more volume, let's go do something in a more controlled environment. Would you sort of allow them to have that sort of free time and ownership at the back end of the training, say for 10 to 15 minutes?
Oh, it depends. You'd organise those skills and stuff. If you're trying to knock training volume off, probably not, because you're actually trying to lower the load, aren't you? So them to go off and do uncontrolled stuff by themselves isn't what you're after. If it's very close skills, that type of stuff, that's very well planned, yep, but not just random.
Awesome. Before we get into the final two questions, one question that I forgot to write down was, what happens during bye weeks in competition? You might have an early bye, then a mid-season, then a late bye. How do you treat those bye weeks, and what are you trying to focus on the bye weeks as well?
Well, bye weeks are there so that you can mentally get away from um, playing. A lot of the time, it takes out competition stress. You still want training volume to go in there. So I would organise a couple of training sessions that still get your normal high speed meters done, your normal acceleration, your base level skills. And then I'm more like I'd prefer them to train Tuesday or Thursday, and then they can have a weekend off, but I'd still give them something to do off feet wise, or something a little bit more gentle, or they might get some running plus an upper body sessions to still mimic a bit of running load, and the upper body is still mimic a bit of soreness from tackling and so forth. So that their body's still trying to repair. So you're keeping that cycle. And depending on, you might get your bye very early on and you don't need it. So you might train 3 times because you actually, you get your bye in week 3, not very convenient. You might get your bye in the middle and they've just been hanging on there. You might decide, okay, they need the weekend completely off. Missing one game worth of I guess volume is probably a good thing for this group. So that's a personal thing that you have to look at with your coaching staff and your players and your situation. If it comes too early, keep training. If it comes at the right time, you might decide we'll just train a little bit shorter on Tuesday, Thursday, give them the weekend off. Yeah, or you might go, they're absolutely emotionally shattered. We might give them earlier the week off, but bring them back on the Tuesday and the Saturday. Oh, the Thursday and the Saturday. That's for you guys to decide as a group. And that's the art of it. There's no correct answer. But the only correct answer is it's not a rest. It's a rest from the intensity and contact and competition pressure, but not a rest from all training completely.
Awesome. So, what has been your method during finals to keep players performing at their best? Because, depending the sport, depends how sort of the structure is. Because, if you finish first, you could have the first week off in the finals, or you might play, it might be one play two. So, you're actually playing the second best team in the comp, and then you have a bye, and then you play another game. So, how do you best sort of prepare for the first week of the finals? Then let's say you have a bye during the second week or a bye before the grand final the following week. How do you best prepare players for that?
Well, every time I've won competitions, it's you still train Tuesday, Thursday, and then you definitely do something on the Saturday, and you make it a little bit of social afterwards. A lot of the time, it's starting to warm up in where you are, and that heat acclimation is part of it. Really important. And if you miss out on a Saturday because you're training Tuesday and Thursday night under lights or so forth, if you miss out on a Saturday in heat, that's a bit of a problem. So that training session that you do on that day, yeah, it's lighter, it's more controlled. You're not going to get the injuries of competition. You're still doing that, but you might decide, okay, guys, you've got to wear two jumpers. Okay, we're wearing jumpers and tracksuit pants because we're going to get the heat acclimation that you might miss out on as well, and getting them used to hydrating for that hotter environment. Now, it really depends on where you're at from a team. Um, the way I'd like to have my team, I've described it to people, I want them emotionally where at the beginning of a warm up, am I about to have a riot or have I just had it controlled? Because they're that excited, they're that up, but you've just got control of this group because they're so buzzing. And I'd like to at least once or twice a week have them in that. Okay, this could turn into a riot if uncontrolled because of that enthusiastic and energetic. So that's what you should look for as your group, and that's how you treat your Saturday session if you've got a bye week. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I've been in similar situations here in Canberra. So the way that the final system work is it's one play two in the major, say semi-final or prelim, doesn't matter, whatever you call it. And then it's three play four in the minor. Um, Whoever wins out of the major from 1v2 goes straight to the grand final. Whoever loses has a second chance and plays the winner of the 3 and 4 the following week. And I've been in a situation where we've lost the major. So we've then had to play an extra game to get into the grand final. We won that one and then we won the grand final. Then I've also been in the situation where we've won the first week, had that next Saturday off, and then lose the grand final. So it's really interesting to see, having that week off, could be detrimental towards your performance in the grand final if you haven't managed that 2 week block. And as you said, maybe have a training session on the Saturday during the heat, because here in Canberra it does warm up on grand final day and the sun is out. So you really got to make sure that you're best prepared for that. And yeah, it's just been interesting when you think the season's over after, if you've lost the major semi, then you get a second chance and you're like, oh sweet, we got a second chance to beat the team. Or they're doing the same to you and you just don't show up on grand final and perform. So it's such a balancing act to know what to do and what not to do. But I do believe that if you've kept the training load pretty consistent and worked on the things that you need to work on, and you've hit all those non-negotiables during the finals, you really are going to be able to best prepare your players to perform out in the field. And if they lose, it's not because of their preparation, it's just because the other team was better on the day, and you need to accept that. But you don't want to look back during the week where oh, we changed this, we did that, we didn't actually hit some metrics that we wanted to hit, and our training load wasn't really ideal. And you look back on it like, oh shit, that's probably the reason why we lost. So yeah, you don't want to look back on a week of training where you had an opportunity to best prepare your players, and then you get to the really important dance at the end of the season, and unfortunately lose, not because the other team was better, but because you didn't really prepare your players the best that you could have.
Yeah, I'll always take the week off if I can. It gives a chance to get rid of some little niggle injuries, and you get 4 to 5 training sessions to prepare for a game versus 2. So if I could, I'd take the bye all the time by being successful, and that's why it exists, so that you've earned the right to actually get over some little niggling injuries, and you get 4 to 5 training sessions to prepare versus 2. So I take that any day of the week. You've just got to manage that well.
100%. So, final question. So, summarizing everything we talked about over these 2 episodes, what are the key pieces of information you want listeners to take away from using GPS units and metrics, and also in regards to training loads as well?
Yeah, keep it simple at the beginning. Take a look at what a game is, then start looking what a game is when ball's in play. Then start looking within that ball in play for the minimum and maximum time. Then within that, start looking at what is successful components within that ball in play, and then mimic that intensity for your conditioning. Okay, that's what you want to start looking at, and that's for your different positions. And workload should be as steady and predictable as possible, so that the human body can get used to that. And there's slow manipulations on that. In terms of hardness, that your question there, more volume early in the week with a little less intensity, but a lot less volume at the end of the week where you're ramping up the intensity would be my suggestion. And a bye week isn't a complete week off, because you will get a training spike after the end of that. It might be a week off some harder stuff. You might even do some different types of training modalities, but no load is worse than some load.
Awesome. And the only thing I would add on to that is, if you have access to GPS units and metrics, use it. Don't get too caught up in, all the data that it produces, because you could just spend the next, 2 days just getting caught up, and you haven't prepared anything for this week's training as well. So figure out what's important to you, what's easy to track and is not taking up too much of your time, because you do have to coach at the end of the day, and provide some data to the coaching group and the athletes as well. So don't get too caught up. Focus on the things that you want to focus on and seems important. And if you're not using GPS data or units because you don't have the financials for that, that's fine. There's plenty of other ways that you can, start to look at training in terms of training loads as well. You can, just have a piece of paper and stopwatch and just mark out how long the ball's in play, as Ben's talked about today, and just start take your own stats and analytics and see how you can best prepare your players during the week, and just start conversations around, okay, how did you find that training? Did you find it hard? Did you find it too easy? Is there anything else you need to really work on? And then start using your coaching eye as well out on the field, and also at trainings when they're not with you, to really start to understand what's the best thing that you can do for the team as well, in terms of your conditioning blocks and warm up and sprint tech and anything along those lines as well. So I really hope that you found these 2 episodes informative. If you do have any more questions, or we need to do a part 3, please reach out. We're more than happy to do that. If you do want to see the Google Doc that I'm currently using right now, it's nothing special, but it could be something new to you. Please definitely reach out as well. So that's all the questions I have for today, Ben. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge in this space. I thought it was fantastic, these 2 episodes, to really get to understand something that's, it's not that new to sport. It's only been around for not too long. So, but it's been awesome to really understand that and apply it to maybe more of a club setting, but also understand what the pros are doing as well.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. It's been fantastic. Good questions. And it's hard that there's no binary answers. There's suggestions and ideas and based on experience. Yeah, but there's plenty of research out there as well. Take a look at that. And remember, a lot of that research is done on elite teams or a different team from your population. So take what you can from it, but even the results in research aren't binary, because that's not your team, that's not your age group, that's not your level, that's not your weather conditions, that's not your team, but it's ideas and concepts that you could implement.
100%. So thanks again, Ben. It's been awesome.
Pleasure. Catch you later.
Thanks for tuning into another episode of Elite Rugby SandC podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and rate Elite Rugby SandC on Spotify and YouTube, and make sure you follow us on Instagram. Sign up to become a beast via the link in the description or via Instagram page. Also, don't wait, make that good decision and join Elite Rugby SandC today and take your game to the next level.